Hi, I'm Joe Hackman, happy Tesla owner, and you're listening to Travel Fuels Life.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Travel Fuels Life, the show that encourages, educates, and inspires you to take action, expand your horizons, and start living your dream of seeing the world. I'm your host, Drew Hannush, and wherever you're listening to the show today, I hope you'll take just a couple of moments to subscribe and also rate the show if you would. That always helps us get found a little bit easier when people are doing searches, all those search algorithms and that sort of thing. So if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. It'd be a big thank you for the effort that I'm putting forth in terms of finding these guests that we're bringing in. And so it's just a plus all the way around. Plus it gives me feedback, helps me know where I can improve the show. And in fact, if you want, the best place to make comments on this individual show is to go to the show notes page, which is on travelfuelslife.com. That's travelfuelslife.com, and just look for today's episode, and you can leave comments down there in the comments box at the bottom of the page. And plus, we'll have all the references from today's episode. Those will all be available for you there on the show notes page. And without further ado, I'm going to get to our guest, who is Joe Hackman. Now, Joe and I have known each other for many years, including some time when I was on his podcast. He was doing a technology podcast, and we were talking about social media. And I was blogging at the time, and I was very interested in the subject and wanting to learn as much as I could. We kept in touch over the years, and it's interesting because recently, I was taking a trip out to the Four Corners in the Southwest to go travel these long distances, 4,500 miles that I drove. And I was so proud of myself because I drove a car that got 36 miles to the gallon. And then as soon as I got home, I looked at my Facebook page, and Joe had a map up there showing that he had just done the same exact drive in a Tesla, which in that case, he used zero emissions. So what I thought was something that was for the future, and that electric cars really weren't going to be able to go those kinds of distances, and that there'd be such a hassle in terms of getting your car recharged and what you do in all those cases. All this is swimming through my head, and I said, I got to get Joe on the show, and we got to start talking about what he did with this trip and how the trip went. So Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks for the warm welcome.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for being on. You've been in technology for so many years in IT, and so it didn't really surprise me, I guess, when I saw your Facebook page and saw that you had gotten a Tesla and that you had done this trip. But, for me, I always thought this was a car of the future, and here you are doing this right now. And all I could think about was range anxiety and finding recharging stops. And if you had to rate your experience, what would you give it?
Oh, I would give it a 5. And, it's actually funny because not that long ago, I felt exactly like you. I just thought, EVs, that's pretty cool. Tesla's got some neat cars, it looks like. People seem to like them. They seem to have good performance, and they've got these superchargers and that sort of thing. But I didn't picture myself earlier this year owning a Tesla and having already logged a 3,400 mile trip in it. Certainly. So you're not alone. So it sounds like you're probably closer than you realize to maybe being an EV owner yourself.
There might be something sitting out in my driveway that I'm not expecting at Christmas time, right?
We can only hope.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Cool.
I know the Tesla elves will bring it, I guess. I'm not sure how that.
Well, I'm sure they would deliver one to your house.
Yeah.
But they might want a thing or two for it.
That's true. So being a new Tesla owner then, It's kind of interesting. We chatted a little bit before about this, but kind of give us the experience, because as you know, I think the traditional way of buying a car is to just wander into the dealership, look around, take it out for a test drive, get a feel for it, try to not get overly saturated with sales talk from the salesman, and then end up buying a car and hopefully not regretting it when you drive home. So what was your experience with buying the Tesla?
Yeah, so actually, buying a car in many ways has gotten easier. I think a lot of the dealerships now have internet sales, and they have people that aren't really salespeople. They're kind of tech people, and you go online and you get your Costco price, and it's a pretty good deal. You don't have to deal with a lot of hassle, but there is still some hassle. So that, to me, the Tesla experience was part of the whole thing. And so the way this all came about actually was, we were just kind of thinking down the road, like yourself. Yeah, man, maybe EV would be cool. Tesla has that Model 3. Let's go test drive one. So my wife went on the Tesla website, and you know what? The Model 3s were so constrained at the time that they didn't even do test drives. So she scheduled a test drive with the Model X. We're like, oh, okay, that's cool. I mean, she didn't really care for the S body style. I don't really care either way. I mean, for me, I am kind of an SUV guy. We still owned an SUV at that time, a German car. So we ended up going and test driving this car. And the thing that was really cool about it, number one, is everything was done online. So you just kind of show up, you have an appointment, they greet you. The people that work there seem to be happy. That's a nice thing. Nice. It's not like there's a couple guys like you feel like you're meat walking into like the Predator den kind of thing at a lot of dealerships. But in this particular case, everybody's just easygoing, happy, just relaxed. And they offer you water and things like that while you're waiting. And there's cars there in the showroom to look at and all that. So then we get to actually do the test drive. And that was when the car kind of spoke for itself. We were both thoroughly blown away by pretty much every aspect of it, from the interior, the quality of all the, it has leather that's not natural. It's like a vegetable leather or something, but it's super durable and comfortable. And the seats were really comfortable. And of course you got that nice big screen in the middle to look at. And it's pretty amazing. You turn on the rear backup camera and you can really see what's there. It's very high definition. So it was just from start to finish, it was a great experience. The car itself, I was pulling onto the freeway near Rockland, California with a Porsche, I don't know, 9 something, a nice one. I don't even know the models. It wasn't your standard, Porsche. And, I felt bad for the guy because I didn't have to work at all. And I just basically kept up with them the whole time, and I could tell, they were really enjoying driving that Porsche. And to me, it was almost funny that here I am in this car that's it is a performance vehicle, but it's not by any means does it have that mystique that, a really expensive Porsche. I would say it was one of those, $150,000, $200,000 Porsches. And I'm having no trouble at all casually pulling onto the freeway behind this thing, and this car is just handling like it's on rails, and it's so fast.
Wow. It's
just unbelievable. And just the whole thing was just a phenomenal experience. And it really opened my eyes to how far Tesla has come, and how viable an EV can be. I mean, it's fun to drive, great performance, great features, comfortable, pretty much checking all the boxes. But then, of course, there's always that range fatigue, that number one problem, and maybe we can talk about. I'm sure we'll be talking about that because it was a 3,400 mile trip.
Yeah,
and if you're going to drive 3,400 miles, including through Death Valley and other things, range fatigue might certainly be an issue. I did not have any.
It's definitely where my curiosity is because, my experience with electric vehicles up to this point has been, well, let's see, where can I go within 200 miles? And then do I have a place I can stop and make sure that I can get it recharged and all that sort of stuff. So I definitely want to get into that. But the first question, which you may not think would be the most obvious question, is, do the dials really go to 11?
The dials go to 11.
Yeah, I hear the heat dial and the radio dial go to 11.
Oh, I've never turned any of the dials up past 7 or 8. So I don't know.
So I'm going to teach you. So I'm going to teach you something about a Tesla. I was watching the Graham Norton show the other day, and Jamie Lee Curtis was on there, and her husband Christopher Guest was in the movie Spinal Tap. And in the movie Spinal Tap, they, have you seen that?
I have. I saw it when I was much younger.
Yeah. So, the whole gag was he would walk over to his amp and he'd turn it up to 11, and it's a rockumentary, but more of a joke. And so he's like, everybody else plays it to 10. I'm going to get it to 11. And apparently Elon Musk is a really huge fan of that movie. And so he decided that his dials would go to 11.
Oh, that's so funny. It doesn't surprise me at all. They put all kinds of little interesting things in there, and they're adding new things all the time. The version 9 upgrade had a few Atari games that you could play or that your children could play while you're charging your car or something. So there's a lot of just cool. And, actually not being that far off in age from Elon, makes it, from my point of view, so much of it I get, but I forgot about that scene.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize, but I love that story. So yeah, but technically I don't know if I'll ever put the dials at 11 because when I don't run the fans that high when I'm adjusting the climate controls. I don't run the volume unless I'm on my cell phone. That's what I turn it up the highest to, but that's 7 or 8.
Right.
And just about 5 is this 5 or 6 is the sweet spot on the music and podcasts.
So how cool is it to own a company where you can design something and you can put your favorite movie into it?
Exactly. Exactly.
So I mean, I think kind of what you're saying is that this is really a car for the up and coming generations because it's it's really going away from the old school thinking in not just moving to an electric vehicle, but in everything about it, how it's built.
There's zero compromises. Tesla has the 3 safest cars by the National Highway Traffic Safety Association. They have the number 1, 2, and 3 crash ratings. Mm-hmm. They're phenomenally, the resale value is incredible. And a lot of people have been saying for years that the resale value on a Tesla is going to crash or it's going to tank. It just hasn't happened. You know, they're worth more to the shareholders than GM. Mm-hmm. You know, and a lot of people dissed them for not making money. They're making money now. Mm-hmm. It's in my opinion, it's a company that's got everything going for them, and I don't see anyone ever catching up with them. I think what's going to happen in the future is people will choose to partner with them. Even Daimler, you know, in the last couple weeks, kind of alluded to that. Oh, well, we're not ruling out partnering with Tesla. They probably figured out what it was going to take to put together a charging network that was even half the size. And they thought, wow, you know, we really better keep our door open with Elon and company if we want to have a chance to actually have a viable EV that can go anywhere outside of, 100 miles.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the trip, because this is, like I say, it's fascinating for me. When I took a trip to Alaska about 20 years ago, I learned that I needed to always have my gas tank full, because you didn't know where the next gas station was going to be. And I've carried that philosophy. Even when I took my trip to the Four Corners, I went through and I used Gas Buddy, and I figured out where the lower prices were for gasoline and where I could stop. And I plotted out every single gas station. So I made sure that after 300 miles, I had a gas station, so I wasn't going below half a tank wherever I went. And then I see your Facebook post and I go, wait a second. Now, how is he doing an electric car through the same route that I'm going when I'm a little paranoid about running out of gasoline? So I guess the first question is, because obviously you made it, because you're here to tell us the story, and you're still bragging about Teslas. But how did you go about doing your planning? I mean, is there an app that you can go out and use, or do you have to plot them all out ahead of time, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I think maybe just I'll give you a little context of the overall purpose of the trip and how that all came together. And, first thing, I guess I had a kind of a perfect storm, and I viewed it as an opportunity. So I had 2 back-to-back jobs, one in Arizona, one in Colorado. And I basically, within the previous 2 months, bought this Tesla Model X. And I'm like, okay, what a great opportunity. I don't really want to ship my tools back and forth, my tools and equipment between 2 places over a weekend and take a flight into one area and then over to another. It just, to me, it was like, I've been through most of these areas. I'm going to drive. Okay. I'm going to just take this Tesla and check it out. So I'm actually a member of there's a really good group in Facebook, Tesla tips and tricks, I think, community. Maybe I can get you the actual address before you publish this. But I got all kinds of information from these guys, and one of the things that people told me, some people say, "Oh yeah, just use the Tesla navigation to figure out." No. The Tesla navigation is fine, but there's a website called literally A Better Route Planner that you can make aware of your car. In other words, you associate your car with your login. And so the website knows your charge, it knows your location, and you can put in all kinds of other assumptions about weather, wind, and stuff like that. So my goal with this trip was to not go on roads that I had gone on before whenever possible. So I didn't just do the standard fastest route. I went down through Death Valley. In fact, I camped in my car one night just to experience that.
Nice.
Because, one of the kind of tips that you can do with Tesla is you can actually charge it pretty fast at an RV park. I think it's 3 or 4 hours. You can charge it pretty full. Whereas at the supercharger, the most you're ever going to wait is probably an hour. So, you have an avenue to charge your car pretty much anywhere in the United States, because there's RV parks everywhere, and major interstates. They're completely covered. So I basically used a Better Route Planner, and I planned my trip to go on the backside of the Sierras through Death Valley and down over into Arizona, using a different route than I ever used previously, going that way. And same on the way back. I took 50 back from Pueblo, Colorado, which was absolutely gorgeous.
Oh yeah,
unbelievable drive. I missed the autumn colors in the Rockies. Yeah, and it was still beautiful. And I can only imagine what it was like a few weeks or a month before. On the western side of the Rockies, it was still, full blown autumn. The great yellows and whatnot. But
I was gonna say, if you ever need timing tips, I hit all the places at just the right time. It was so beautiful.
Nice.
I mean, yellow trees everywhere. Yeah, it was amazing.
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So of all the, and that drive down Highway 50, I went US 50 from. I went down to the Royal Gorge Bridge, and so I don't know if you stopped off there or not, but that was fun. And then just the drive through there, I kept stopping the car over and over and over again to get out and take pictures. And I'm like, maybe I should be on a bike or something, because as much as I'm stopping now, it's like, geez, it's just everything is a photograph here. So
Yeah.
So you had no real tension when driving those back, and you mentioned something to me before this about how you would charge the car down, that you wouldn't let it run down too much, and what was the benefit of that?
Yeah, so I mean, you don't really have to run it down. So there's always, you can drive. I have the 100 model, which has a bigger range than the 75. You can drive the 75 on the trip that I took.
Okay.
So for starters, but the nice thing about the 100 is obviously you have a little extra. So you can always extend things out if you want to. Normally the Tesla navigation wants me to basically skip a charger here and there. And I would rather, well, for one, I wanted to see them. So I stopped at more chargers, but also, and I don't know if this is a net benefit on time, or I don't know if it's good for the batteries. I'm sure all kinds of people will pick it apart and say, oh my gosh, that guy's an idiot. He shouldn't have done that, because it's just inevitable. It's 2018.
Right.
But I would, I wouldn't run the battery way down, and I would charge it, and I wouldn't charge it way up, which in theory is a good thing, because lithium batteries don't like to be too low or too high. But it was nice because when you first plug in, your charge rate is a lot faster, and it really slows after, like, say 70%. So you already know when you're sitting there charging how long you have to charge to get to your next stop. But it also updates. So one of the nice things is you're looking in the navigation, and it's always telling you either before you leave or after you've left and your route is going, it's telling you what your arrival charge is going to be at the next stop. So I always shot for minimum 20%. I didn't want to go below 20% for anything. And I don't think I ever did on that trip. I don't think I even came close, because I was stopping at chargers and checking them out and stuff like that. So, or grabbing a coffee. Yeah, I put in some long days. I drove a lot.
Yeah.
I got to Arizona in 2 days, got from Arizona to Colorado in 2 days of driving. And so, and then I got all the way back to California in 2 days from Colorado.
So you're doing, you said, what was your longest day, would you say?
So the longest day, there was a reason why. I had a why. I'd injured my shoulder, so I was anxious to get back and get that looked after and just get off the road, because driving wasn't necessarily fun, although it wasn't. The autopilot really saved me, and we can talk about that more if you like. But I drove from Pueblo, Colorado to Elko, Nevada, which is 800 miles in one day on Friday.
Wow.
Yeah. I had no caffeine.
Oh my goodness.
By the time I felt like I needed caffeine, which was only from the very far eastern part of Nevada to Elko, by that point, I had not experienced any fatigue. And the fatigue reduction with autopilot is, I would say, minimum 90%.
Wow.
It literally keeps you in your lane. It slows you down if you're getting too close to the car in front of you. And they added a new feature now, this navigate on autopilot. It'll even make lane changes and stuff. It'll ask you to confirm by doing the blinker. So it literally does like on-ramp to off-ramp navigation. Now there's a little nag step. You have to be touching the wheel. You have to, it's looking for input because it wants to make sure you're not just sitting back taking a nap.
Well, and that was my question was, I mean, what happens if you doze off? Because, I mean, if you're just, one of the things that keeps me engaged on a drive is that I have to pay attention and look in my mirrors and, do all of those functions. So what happens if you doze?
I think you'd be in trouble if you dozed off because you would hear some sounds. If you came close to an object and we're going to hit an object, it would try to automatically stop. But I could see it going terribly wrong because the steering portion of the autopilot, if you don't put input, I believe, and I think it actually turns off. So I'm pretty sure that feature turns off. So wherever the car was going to drift, it would still drift, although it would slow down if it saw an object. You could end up in a bad crash even with it, but you're definitely safer than you would be in a usual car, and probably those audible tones would be enough to to alert you that you're snoozing.
I just keep thinking of this problem we have these days of people texting and driving, that they could be texting to their heart's content and I wouldn't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're a lot safer if somebody's texting while driving in a Tesla. I took liberties. Let me tell you, I took liberties on this trip. If I needed to pick something up on the floor, on the seat next to me, they were calculated risks. It wasn't like I, sat back and tipped my seat back or anything, but I would reach and grab my cooler and keep my eyes more or less on the road throughout most of it. But I took out my phone and took pictures. I would never do that in my normal car.
Right.
I took pictures while I was driving because that's part of why I wanted to drive the car a lot. I wanted to see how well the various features worked. I wanted to see what the limits were. And there are situations where it'll freak out. Like, if somebody crosses an intersection ahead of you and you have autopilot on, the car will brake like hell. I mean, it will literally, like, you're gonna die.
Oh my!
Stop.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, I'm like, relax, car. It's okay. The car's not going to be there by the time we get there. But it's not teaching anyone a lesson.
Right.
And getting close to them. It's not taking any chances. Which, if you're gonna have technology like that, that's probably the way you want it. Now, I think those braking settings, they have thresholds. Mine is not set to the lowest end and it's not set to the highest end. I think I'm at the default, which was like moderate or something like that. So I could probably get it to not brake as radically in those situations. But at the same time, I would prefer that than, let's say my eyes had shifted off the road and, or I got distracted by a passenger or something and the car noticed that and stopped. I prefer that over the alternative. So I'll take it.
Right. So did you have any oh crap moments while you were driving it where you were like, uh-oh, what am I doing?
Well, yeah, I did. I learned there was a couple things. I think the biggest oh crap things for me were anything. So for example, a failed lane change. Mm-hmm. Where the car jerks. So so if you're in autopilot and you turn on a blinker, the car will merge into the lane that you put the blinker on. And yeah, but sometimes if you're near other cars or it detects something that it thinks might be a potential hazard, it'll swerve back. And it's kind of nerve-wracking, and it's really, really nerve-wracking when your shoulder hurts like hell, because anything that causes a jerking motion, like that example I gave you earlier, where it was literally panicking, doing panic braking when the car pulled, that hurt like hell. And like just any jerking motions. But I wasn't a normal driver at that point. So it's not like the car is going to put on kid gloves for me.
Right.
So I had to deal with that. But all in all, I learned that when you're passing other cars and you want to merge back into that lane, wait longer. Just make sure that the car in the lane to your right, and I wasn't even close when it would jerk back. It did it a few times and the car was, but give it a little extra time so it's not even a consideration. It seems to run that algorithm in a much easier way. And I didn't have a single situation where it jerked back after I gave it like 10 car lengths instead of 7 or 6 or 5. So I think it's detecting the car that you passed and it's saying, okay, something ain't right.
Yeah. So I mean, any car you buy, any new car you get, there's going to be things that you just kind of have to. I mean, the first time the anti-lock brakes came out, and I actually had to use them, and the car started jolting. It just freaked me out. I'm like, okay, it wasn't a situation where I really needed the anti-lock brakes, but I had hit that threshold, and the car started to just do its kind of jumpy,
like the pedals like shaking.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So your 800-mile day. Now, how long were you on the road that day?
So I left Pueblo. I left my customer at I think 8:30, and I think I got to Elko somewhere around 11:30 at night.
Okay. So in doing that, because this would be a fascinating case study for recharging your car because it's a lot of distance, 800 miles to go. Do you remember how many times you stopped to charge?
I stopped a lot. When I could have gone 2, I just went to 1, and I wanted to check out the charging stations so I knew which ones to come back to, because some of them are really cool. And if you're traveling with your family or something like that, there's charging stations where there's stuff where you can really spend a long time and be very comfortable doing it. So you might come in low to, say, Lone Pine, California, which was one of my favorite stops. Or you might come in low at Green River in Utah, which was another really cool stop. So it just really, I wanted to check them all out. And I'll tell you, I'll avoid Reno. Reno was kind of out of the way.
Yeah. And
it was at a casino, and it took me a while to find it. I was like, that one was kind of annoying, but I did win $60, so I guess it made it worthwhile. But
what game were you playing? What game were you playing?
Roulette.
Oh, okay. All
Roulette.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. I'll have to teach you how to play baccarat. That's my casino game.
Yeah. I've watched people lose a lot of money on that game.
Oh yeah. That's for sure. So how long would you spend at a recharge on average on that day?
I would say on that day, probably average was 30 to 40 minutes. And in some cases, I took naps during that, just sort of set the clock on my phone to wake me up around the time that the charger was anticipating I would be done charging.
Okay.
So,
well, that stops you from dozing off later, right?
Well, it certainly reduced, and it definitely extended my day, taking extra stops. And so it wasn't really like, I mean, I had a long stop in where I picked up a sandwich and walked around up in the Rockies. I forget the name of the town. It was past a large kind of resort town off 50, probably the biggest one you'll see off 50. But it was a neat little area, and I just, walked around just to, get a feel for it. I probably walked a mile or mile and a half, something like that. And just kind of hung out and then talked to people at this little store where they sell and make you sandwiches and stuff. So I got a sandwich for the road there. So, I mean, just very different amounts of time, just depending on where the next charging was and whether I really wanted to go to that one or I wanted to try to stretch it out. So.
Yeah. So for me, I learned a long time ago when I took a trip through the Rockies, and for some crazy reason, I was in Bozeman, Montana, and I had a trip planned to the next night I was going to stay in Missoula, which is, across the state, but it's not like a crazy long drive. But I decided that I was going to drive up instead up to Lake Louise in Banff near Calgary. And I ended up with a 16-hour driving day, and I can tell you that by the last hour of that drive, I was seeing things in the road that were not there. Right? I mean, we have a threshold ourselves of how far you could actually physically drive your body to pay attention to curves in the road, and be on top of your driving skill, and so it's interesting to hear about that autopilot feature, because I can imagine that if you could just give your mind even smaller breaks, or even the idea of stopping at the charging stations to get little power naps, all of these things I think would, not that I would ever advise people drive that much in a day unless they just absolutely had to, but I mean, it is almost its own little safety feature to force you to have to stop the car occasionally and get out and walk around or refresh yourself somehow.
Yeah, it really is. And it really does have that kind of an effect. Just the stops also are big fatigue reducers, but that combined with the autopilot is, and just the options you have, because you can listen to music, you can listen to podcasts, you can, some of the stations they have this 80s alternative station. This is so good. It was just like, I mean, there were so many songs I probably hadn't heard in 20, 30 years. And I was just like, wow, it's so great. It's so great to hear these songs.
Yeah, so you and I have similar music tastes in many ways. So that was one question I was going to ask you. What was the song that you heard on the road that was most memorable to you, that when you think of this trip, that song is probably going to pop in your head?
Oh yeah, I got it for you. And it's an artist that I don't remember thinking that much of at the time. Uh-huh. But man, I liked his Generation X more than his solo stuff, Billy Idol.
Yeah.
But Billy Idol, Blue Highway.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's a great song. Yeah.
Oh, it is a fantastic. I forgot how good that song is. And I don't want to overplay it, but when you're in this new car that you have, and this whole experience, and you're seeing things. I saw a bald eagle fly next to me for a while over the Arkansas River. That was so freaking cool. But when you have all that and then a song like Billy Idol, Blue Highway, that you haven't heard in forever comes on the radio, and you're like, man, that has a sound to it. That is a great song. That was super cool. So, but there was many songs I appreciated, but right when you said that, I immediately thought of Billy Idol, Blue Highway, and I skipped a lot of Billy Idol songs.
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't interested.
That's one of those songs that I have to be very careful that I don't get a lead foot and get a ticket when I'm listening to that. In fact, there is a song I got a ticket to back many years ago, and I was driving out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and it was starting to drizzle down rain, and I was listening to a Rush album, and it was Force 10 was the name of the song, and it just had such a driving beat to it that I didn't realize that I was doing 80 miles an hour down this back road. And then here I see a policeman. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to get me. There's no doubt.
Yeah, bought and paid for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, but those are memories, and sometimes it's funny because every time I take a trip, there's usually a song or an album or something that I attach to that trip.
Yeah. Yeah, I had one years ago where it was Depeche Mode Violator, that album. Yeah. That's a phenomenal album it's not one you want to listen to all the time,
right?
But bust that out on a trip. That can be very entertaining.
So where were you on that trip?
I believe that one was between San Diego and the Bay Area. I drove back and forth several times when I lived down there and had family up here. Mm-hmm. So it was probably going back to visit or coming back from a visit.
So this is an interesting question for somebody who lives in California. When you're taking that trip, do you just go down I-5 or do you drive down the Big Sur and do the whole Capistrano and all that?
If you want to take more than one day,
yeah,
you take the coast. But if you want to get there in a day,
right,
you just take 5. You suck it up and you take 5. But taking the coastal highways in California, they're incredibly windy in many places, and especially north of the Bay Area.
Right.
Maybe not so much south. It's a little better. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think I've driven the whole thing at some point, or the majority of it.
Yeah, it took me 2 trips, but I came up from San Diego to San Francisco 1 year along the coast, and then I had a convention in San Francisco, and I drove from San Francisco to Seattle along the whole route. So it took me 2 trips. That definitely would be a hard trip to do in one big vacation, because somehow you got to get back home.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you giving me kind of a sense of what the future of driving will be. I mean, a part of me wonders how long will it be, and there probably already are places you could go and rent a Tesla if you wanted to for your trip, or I mean, if you go overseas, you can rent an Aston Martin. So I'm sure somewhere you can go rent a Tesla, but definitely not mainstream at this particular time. So it's fun to get kind of a glimpse into the future and see what we'll be doing. Especially, I mean, would you consider yourself a road tripper? Is that really your thing, or you kind of like just doing it every once in a while, but you'd rather travel by plane? Or
I would say, yeah, I guess you could categorize me as somewhat of a road tripper.
Yeah.
We're planning a trip next year where we're going to go in the Tesla this time. We have a camper, like a trailer that we pull behind a truck. In fact, we're actually thinking we're probably going to sell the camper, the trailer, and start doing our road trips in the Tesla, just because of the range that we have and all the advantages that the car gives us. It's a great car for a road trip, which is really probably counter. And I just want to say one other thing, okay? Because you're still in that future mindset,
right?
If anyone who's listening, if you go and you test drive a Model 3, if you like or want an inexpensive sedan, and relatively inexpensive. Right. They're all expensive, right?
Right.
Or a Model S or a Model X, and you're really in the market, you will probably buy one. So if you don't want to buy one, don't test drive one. And I'm not joking. And when it turns out right, you'll thank me anyway.
Right.
Gosh, Joe, thanks for saying that. I went and tested. I loved it. I own one now. I'm so happy. It is such a cool vehicle in so many ways, and there's not a whole lot that can go wrong with it. I mean, there is a lot of electronics, but it's not like with a internal combustion engine where you have a bazillion things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
So if something does go wrong, it really should not take much to get it fixed. So.
Yeah. It's that whole feeling of I'm getting a software download to my car, and I just think about sometimes how my computer operating system works, and I think, do I really want to be driving around something running off of a computer operating system? At least it's not Windows, right?
Yeah, I think it runs some kind of Linux or something like that. So.
Yeah.
And I had one weird glitch with that. If you hold down both wheels, if you have a glitch, if you hold down both steering wheel wheels, it reboots everything. Mm-hmm. But the car doesn't just stop running. It keeps going. It's not like the screens are blank, and the air conditioning shuts off, but the car keeps on driving.
But that's better than the Toyota I was driving, which I have really long legs. And so if I was, there were a couple of times I was driving down the road and I would reach into my pocket for something and my knee would go up and it would hit the key. And I drive an I drive an Altima, and the Altima has a push button start, so it's me getting used to a key again. But it's this big, long, flat key, and my knee went up, and it bumped that key and shut the car off while I'm doing 50 miles an hour down the road. And I'm going, wait a second, this isn't good.
Oh my!
Yeah, and I'm like,
scary.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly. I mean, sometimes when you shut ignition off, brakes stop working, and that kind. But in this case, luckily, I didn't run into any of that kind of situation. But that happened twice on that trip. And I thought that is just way too easy for somebody to be able to bump their knee up there and shut the car off. So, it's these little things. All cars have flaws. The question is, are they fatal flaws, or are they things you just got to get used to and deal with? So,
sure.
Well, cool. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and introducing us to all of this. It's great to hear your enthusiasm about it and really get a little bit more insight into the vehicle.
Yeah, I'm just getting started, but it's been my pleasure, and it's always good to talk with you, Drew.
All right, fantastic. And if anything that we can point you to or point our listeners to in terms of maybe seeing where you may be posting information about your Tesla experience, or if they have any questions or anything like that?
Yeah, probably the best places for people to catch me would be for just my personal blog. It's just joehackman.com.
Okay.
And then my work website, if people are curious, is managedsolutions.com. And drop me a note. They can drop me a note through the contact forms on either one. Say, hey, I heard you on the podcast and I got a question about this or whatever. I'm totally approachable, so no sweat.
All right, excellent. I will post all of that information as well on our show notes on travelfuelslife.com. So if anybody needs a refresh on that information, then I should have it posted there as well. So, well, thanks again, Joe, and I appreciate it, and happy motoring.
Thanks to you too, Drew, and thanks to everyone who listened. Take care.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview, and Joe gave us a really good glimpse into a more responsible future with road trips, and road trips are definitely near and dear to my heart, so it's good to know. I think it's not only important to travel, but also to be as environmentally responsible when you travel as you can. Well, that's going to close today's episode, but join us next time because my guest is going to be Christopher Mitchell from travelingmitch.com. He's traveled to 79 countries and 5 continents. Man, it makes my 13 countries and 2 continents seem a little weak, doesn't it? We're going to talk about that a little bit, and we're also going to talk about his 3 years that he spent away from his native Toronto, living in Turkey. We'll talk language, adapting to a new culture, and also some safety concerns you may have traveling in regions that you're not quite sure about. So until then, I appreciate you joining me, and I'll see you next time on Travel Fuels Life.